Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews. Today we are going to take a look at this Dilophosaurus figure from Terra by Battat. I've been trying to make my way through the entire Terra by Battat line and review every figure that they have out at some point for you guys. So we are taking a look at one of the lesser desired figures from the Terra by Battat line, and this is their electronic Dilophosaurus. I think a lot of people were really unhappy, myself included, when they switched from the very cool smaller figures that we all know and love from the Terra by Battat line, and then went with these larger electronic kind of sound type dinosaurs. And I really was happy to see some figures like the Utah Raptor and the Dilophosaurus get re-released, even if they were in these larger sized figures, but I really much would have rathered them be the smaller versions that we had loved and known for many years, and maybe re-release these figures here in that range. But we did get these, so I'm at least happy that the Dilophosaurus did get a re-release, even if it is this bigger, less detailed version. But as per usual, when it comes to the Terra by Battat line, the box is really quite nice. Definitely a very nice box. You've got the very cool background there, kind of showing some sort of scenery behind our Dilophosaurus. And then if we turn the box around, we then get quite a bit of information here on the back all about the Dilophosaurus and the species name and everything. Very cool, very informative box as usual from Terra by Battat. So you always have to give them props for their overall presentation and the actual amount of information they include in their release. But once again, the Dilophosaurus looks interesting at this point. So let's go ahead, break it out of the box, and we'll take a look at it from there. So here is our Dilophosaurus, the brand new, the newer version of the Terra by Battat Dilophosaurus, the only version that is actually in production currently. And again, it's cool to see this figure, or at least the mold of the figure, kind of reused here, but you can see straight away looking at the figure that it is just plagued with kind of an ugly appearance as far as the skin texture goes. You don't really see too much going on in comparison to what the previous figure probably looked like, which I actually don't have the older Terra by Battat Dilophosaurus, not this version specifically, so I'm happy now to have at least a version of it here in my collection. But again, I feel like it's got a decent appearance and definitely not entirely terrible, that's for sure. But you can definitely see, first of all, we've got screw holes galore on this side, but you can definitely see that the overall skin texture of the figure is a bit of a downside as far as getting out some really nice detail within the figure. But to really show it all and to take it all in, we're going to go ahead and get a closer look at this Dilophosaurus right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Dilophosaurus, like I was stating, you can actually take note to the nostrils. So you do have the nostrils sculpted out there, but you can see that as far as the skin texture and everything goes on the head sculpt of our Dilophosaurus, it's not really that great. And you can see that certain areas like the crest and everything are kind of muted as far as the detail goes, and the skin texture that is included down here on the actual head sculpt also isn't really that great. I feel like actually looking over this one, it's probably one of the worst of the bunch of these newer figures, because I did recently review the Ceratosaurus and I actually kind of thought it looked decent. It kind of grew on me a little bit, and looking back to my Carnotaurus review, I kind of like that one as well. But this one, I think the skin texture and the detailing of the body overall, for the most part, looks really muted. Like, you can pick up on a few osteoderms here on the lower jaw, but other than that, the detail just kind of looks to be all like squiggly lines all over the place, so it's not really that great. You can see the skin flap here of the inside of the mouth, and the teeth do look decent. I mean, they're not really that great either as far as the sculpting of the teeth, but the overall paint application to the teeth is actually really nicely done. You don't really see any sloppiness there at all on the teeth on either the upper jaw or lower jaw, so we do have to give kudos in that department. They did do a great job as far as actually including some pretty decent paint application for the teeth. And the overall paint design here, the paint scheme they've gone with as well, looks very reminiscent of the older version, I believe, but it also does look quite nice. It's not really that beautifully and naturally applied. It definitely does look like paint on a figure, but I don't think that the paint scheme they've gone with here is anything that would be unnatural. Definitely something I could see a Dilophosaurus being, As we start to lead down the neck, you can see some creasing in the skin going on, coming down the neck, but you don't really see too much, especially as far as skin texture. It's almost non-existent. You don't really see any scaling or anything on the figure. Coming down here into the body, you can kind of take note to the shoulder blade a little bit there. And once again, the detail here in the arms does not really look that great. Neither do the nails once we get out here to the hands. They almost look more like frog feet or something like that, more so than a Dilophosaurus's hands. The nails appear to be painted pretty nicely, not really that great, but they're not sloppy or anything. It's just that the actual sculpting overall is not really that good. The arms are also extremely long, but the arms also don't really have that good of skin texture. Once again, it's very muted the whole way up. Same deal, once we get up here into the body, you can continue to see how muted the detail is, and as far as actual scaling or anything on the Dilophosaurus goes, it's non-existent. You really don't see anything like that going on. Lots of kind of like creases in the skin and lines and everything throughout the figure, I guess, is sort of their attempt at skin texture on this figure, but it doesn't really look very good. You can see the hip bone there, a little bit sticking out there, protruding from the skin. As you come down into the leg, you can take note to some muscle tone in both the calf and thigh, so that is quite nice to see. Some decent creasing here in the skin of the joint of the knee. You do have the kneecap present, and then coming down into the foot now. See, look at that foot sculpt. That looks very, very strange. Super weird. I don't know if that's how the original Dilophosaurus foot sculpt looked, because these figures are very, very similar to the older versions, but I really do not like the foot sculpt in that area at all. It looks super, super strange. And then leading out the tail, again, you just get like a lot of creasing going on. You can see the seam here where the tail has been connected, and then the tail comes out to a pretty decent curve here that loops back around. And for the most part, there's lots of creasing going on in the skin, so you can see kind of some decent movement going on here in the tail as far as the skin bunching up with the tail curving. But now let's see if that same deal is over here on the other side, which yes, it pretty much is, which you would see more of the skin kind of stretching as opposed to bunching up here on this side if we were really going for like a realistic appearance as far as the movement being shown in the animal. I feel like the actual sculpt looks nice. The overall appearance, if you take in consideration of like this figure, you just made a silhouette of this, it does look good as far as that goes, but once you actually bring the figure itself into play and look at the detailing, it just takes so much away from the figure because of the lack of actual skin texture throughout. As we start to move down the neck on this side, once again, kind of that same deal with just sort of creasing going on in the skin, and now you can start to see the screw holes all over the place, kind of bringing back memories of Vietnam here as far as the Hasbro Jurassic World line goes. So we as collectors start to have some horrible flashbacks as far as screw holes go, but you can see once again the hand looks super weird on this side, and the skin texture is muted once again. As far as the scaling goes, there is no real good detail as far as the skin texture goes anywhere on this figure. You continue to see those screw holes the entire way through. You can see again some decent musculature here in the legs, and you actually pick up on a few osteoderms here and there, which I didn't notice on the other leg, so that at least is a little bit of a nice touch to the overall detailing of the figure. And I feel like the foot sculpt actually looks a good bit better over here than it looked on the other side, but it's still not really that great. It's not terrible, but not very good. The dew claw is not painted either, which is definitely a bit of a downside. And then we come up here, you can see the opening here for the sound to come out. Once again, the screw holes as we lead out the length of the tail. So, unfortunately, the actual detailing, the small, very fine detailing of the figure is pretty darn bad, but the overall appearance to it looks very reminiscent of the older Dilophosaurus that was released from the Battat line, so it at least has a pretty cool nostalgic feel to it. As far as the articulation goes on our Dilophosaurus, the articulation is in the jaw for one thing, but the jaw does not close all the way. That's as far as it goes. So that is definitely another area that is a downside as far as this figure goes. And we also have articulation in the arms, but once I move the arms, it's going to cause the jaw to move, and it's going to display the sounds and the light up feature of our Dilophosaurus, just to give you a warning. So we can move the arm. And I do quite like the noise actually, because it's very different. It's not your typical casual dinosaur roar. So the uniqueness of it definitely is a nice touch, and I do appreciate the fact that Terra by Battat seems to usually go out of their way to come up with a pretty cool noise for each of their dinosaur figures, and that noise specifically is so different and unique. I do quite like it. But you can also see, if I turn the lights off here, or at least turn them down a little bit, the light up feature doesn't work that well. You can see it nicely on the tongue, but the eyes themselves, they light up, but they're very, very dim. And then of course we also have articulation in the legs. It doesn't move too far forward, but it does move quite nicely backward. And it's the same deal on this side. We have the articulation of the arm. This one does not activate the sound feature at all, but it does move the other arm with it. And then we have this leg here, which has about that much of a range of motion to it. The tail does not articulate, even though you can see a seam there, it doesn't move at all. As far as a size goes, from the snout here to the tail, if I can get it to stay, you're looking at roughly around the 11-inch range, or about 28 centimeters for a length. And for a height, when the dinosaur is standing at that comfortable type of a position, you're at about 7 inches, or about 18 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Dilophosaurus, and Robert Muldoon next to our exceptionally large Dilophosaurus. And next to these figures, you can tell that these newer electronic versions of the Terra by Battat figures are much larger than the older figures were. Really, really big. And from a wide shot, honestly, the Dilophosaurus there does not look that bad. He actually looks kind of appealing. So when you're further away, they don't look bad, or that bad, I guess you could say. It's just when you actually get up close and take in the detail, you can see how iffy the figures truly are, but in the size department, they are definitely no slouches. So this electronic Terra by Battat Dilophosaurus has its ups in a way, due to it having that very nostalgic feel of the older Dilophosaurus figure, and the fact that Terra by Battat actually has a Dilophosaurus out currently to buy, but it does have a lot of downsides. It definitely comes with a lot of baggage. Due to the sculpt not really looking that great as far as the skin texture goes, you can see that primarily the animal does not have too much going on as far as scaling or anything, or really fine details in the sculpt overall. And I really feel like that does take away from the figure quite a bit. It's definitely sad to see. And if you take into consideration some of the more awkward areas like the hand sculpt and the foot sculpt not really looking that great, again, there are some pretty significant downsides to the figure. And one downside that I actually didn't even mention previously, if you look at the dinosaur head on, you can see the lower jaw is actually really crooked, does not match up at all with the upper jaw. So once again, there are plenty of downsides. And then if we look at the opposing side of the figure, it is absolutely covered in screw holes, which are also a pretty big downside. But the fact that the Dilophosaurus does look so close to the older version kind of makes me want to like it, and the paint scheme looking so close to the older version again makes me want to like it. And the overall appearance of the figure, like I had stated from afar, doesn't look that bad, and I am a huge fan of Dilophosaurus, so it's hard to make me not want to like a Dilophosaurus figure. But a little bit of me from the inside is calling out and telling me to not like it, just due to the fact that I would have preferred the smaller style figure as opposed to this one. And I can keep my fingers crossed and hope that at some point Terra by Battat does eventually do the smaller line justice and release this figure and the Utah Raptor and some of the older ones that were in the line from way back, like the Diplodocus. I'm sure many people would love to get a hold of. Even if they re-release it with a newer paint scheme, I think people would be overjoyed to have that in their collection, along with quite a few of the others, because they had fantastic figures like the Styracosaurus and the Maiasaura, the Triceratops, the Ouranosaurus. There were so many really, really good older Battat figures that have not seen the light of day with the newer released figures, and then they kind of jumped straight to these electronic versions, and I think that really soured a lot of people on the Terra by Battat line, because so many people were kind of waiting in anticipation for the other older figures to be re-released in this newer line with maybe newer updated paint schemes. That didn't happen, and we're kind of stuck with these guys. But at the same time, if you're going to take this into consideration of this appealing to children, which is clearly the motivation behind this release from Terra by Battat, they did do a good job because kids are going to love things like this. They're going to love the fact that it makes a noise, it has light up sound effects, and it's a very large figure. So at the same time that I think a lot of people are kind of upset with this line, maybe we can take this as this is their attempt to create figures that kids will like while also still having figures that adults will like, which would be the smaller, more common Terra by Battat figures we're so used to. So I sort of like this Dilophosaurus, and I sort of don't like it due to the really bad skin texture and everything. It's just kind of like right in the middle. I'm just iffy in general on the figure. But if you do want to pick this up, I will include a link in the description to where you can do that on Amazon.com. You can also pick it up at your local Target, as they are most usually stocked pretty well when it comes to these figures at mine. So there's probably a pretty good chance that yours will have it as well. So either way, pick this up one way or another if you are in fact interested, and make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.